Republicans lost a big voting rights case in federal court in Mississippi. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started. The RNC has been filing a series of lawsuits saying that mail-in ballots that are sent back by Election Day, but received by election officials in the days after the election should be rejected, shouldn't be counted. Marc, what is their goal behind these lawsuits?
Right. So I think we have to talk about what their goal is behind all the lawsuits and why they brought this case in Mississippi, because they're related, but they're not entirely the same. Their goal behind all of these lawsuits is part of a overall strategy that they've had now for many years to simply make voting by mail harder and reject more mail-in ballots, right? Every aspect of the vote by mail process, from the application of a mail-in ballot, the filling out of a mail-in ballot, the returning of a mail-in ballot, the counting of a mail-in ballot, all of those things are being litigated by Republicans, right? Which is why they want to limit how you get them. They want to do away with drop boxes. They want to impose all kinds of requirements. And they want these limits on the timing by which the ballots have to be received, right? So I think we have to be clear that this is part of an overall attack on mail-in voting that the Republican National Committee and Donald Trump have been involved in. Despite their press releases, despite their websites, this remains an ongoing priority of theirs to make it harder to vote by mail and to reject more mail-in ballots. Now, the second part of this, though, Paige, is fascinating. And Democracy Docket has done some really important coverage on this, which is why in Mississippi, right? Like, why, of all the states you could challenge, why Mississippi? And I think the answer to it is pretty clear, which is that Mississippi, which is not a swing state, Mississippi, which does not have expansive voting rights, right? It's a pretty hard state to vote, has a law, though, that allows for ballots to be received a day or two after the election if they've been mailed on time. And I think the RNC thought that if they quietly sent their Washington, D.C. national high-priced lawyers into Mississippi to strike down this ban, they might either get a receptive audience with the state of Mississippi and not defending it aggressively. I'm not saying that's what they were planning, but it might be. The second, though, is that they thought they'd get conservative judges, right? They'd get a conservative judge in Mississippi, they'd get a conservative Fifth Circuit panel, and they'd be able to essentially set precedent that could then be used in these other states where they really care about this issue a lot. And I think they were probably very unhappy when my law firm saw this lawsuit, intervened, defended it alongside with Mississippi, and they lost.
Marc, and I think it's important to note that the RNC got majority conservative judges in these cases. They had Trump-appointed judges in North Dakota and Illinois, a George W. Bush-appointed judge in Mississippi. They had an Obama-appointed judge in Nevada. And in all four states, the judges said, no, this is a ridiculous request. We are dismissing this lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said why they picked Mississippi. And I think you could say that's also why they have picked a number of these states, right? They are trying to find the right first victory that they could then shop sort of more nationally. But as you point out, they have not been able to find that first victory. In fact, what they have found is a smorgasbord of losses, right? They have lost kind of across the map, across the ideological spectrum of judges, across, frankly, state laws. You know, each of these state laws is slightly different. So they have struck out in this. But I think it's really important to note that at a time where they continue to, at a propaganda level, at a PR level, talk about how, oh, no, we really like voting by mail, that in state after state, they are spending money, their allies are spending money on sending lawyers into courtroom to try to get, sort of purchase in one of these cases, try to get leverage behind one of these cases. So much so that, they brought this case in Mississippi, probably figuring of all of those jurisdictions you just listed, probably the one that they thought would be the friendliest, but they lost. But also in the Nevada case, as you point out, they actually had the Trump campaign on the papers, right? They signaled very directly that this is not just the Republican Party. This is something the Trump campaign cares about.
We also know that the RNC isn't actually interested in correcting these laws, trying to fix what they perceive to be the issue. They want to turn this into a litigation monster that ultimately goes up to the Supreme Court and has a national ruling that impacts all states. Because when they filed this lawsuit in Mississippi lawmakers said, we'll fix the law, we'll pass a new bill to correct the deadline so that mail-in ballots have to be in the hands by Election Day. And the RNC stopped them from passing that.
Yeah, I oftentimes in these videos say, people should subscribe to Democracy Docket or check out something in the show notes. I really am going to encourage everyone to read the article that's in the show notes on this, because Democracy Docket actually exposed what was going on here in a pretty long piece. And, in summary, after the RNC filed this lawsuit, Mississippi legislature, which is controlled by Republicans, were essentially going to say, fine, we'll repeal the law. They actually took legislative steps pretty far along to actually repeal the law. And then at the last minute, undid their effort to repeal the law, clearly because, as you point out, the RNC wanted the court case. They didn't actually want the law change in Mississippi. So I know that'll be in the show notes. Check out that article, and also make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters.
Marc, the RNC plans to appeal in Mississippi. They might appeal in Nevada. The Seventh Circuit has the case in Illinois. Do you think the GOP will try to file this lawsuit in a new state before Election Day?
So I have to assume they'll file it in another state. You point out correctly, they have brought this across jurisdictions, both because of the trial courts, but also the courts of appeals. The Ninth Circuit, a very large circuit, largest circuit in the country, a very ideologically mixed bench. The Seventh Circuit, pretty conservative bench in the Court of Appeals, and as you point out, that case is there. But Paige, you and I have talked about one circuit more than others, and that is where Mississippi sits.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah, the Fifth Circuit is, far and away on a lot of these voting issues, has proven itself to be extremely conservative, and frankly, it's gotten itself reversed a lot recently. One of the stories of the last Supreme Court term was how many cases came out of the Fifth Circuit that even the conservative Supreme Court, as it's currently constituted, found were wrongly decided and needed to be reversed. Again, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in the Fifth Circuit, but it's certainly, anytime there is a critical case filed that's going to go up to the Fifth Circuit, it's something that everyone needs to be paying attention to.
The key argument that the GOP is making in these lawsuits is that they say states are illegally extending Election Day by letting mail-in ballots come in later. Marc, at the same time, the GOP has embarked on this campaign telling people to vote early, vote by mail. What do you think it says about the Republican Party that they're saying one thing to the public, but another thing in court?
It goes to show that, number one, they are shameless. They are shameless hypocrites. That, by the way, being shameless hypocrites may be the kindest thing I could say about the Republican National Committee and under Donald Trump. Let's be clear. The RNC is now run by someone who was put in place because Ronna McDaniel, the former chair, was not a supplicant enough, even though she changed her last name for Donald Trump and was willing to basically do whatever he wanted. She wasn't even far enough. So they got a new chair who's more committed to these kinds of voter suppression tactics. They put Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, as the vice chair. Right? They put the one of the lawyers who they have running their so-called election integrity program is currently under indictment for the fake elector scheme. Right? So, what it tells me is that they are going to continue to try to use the courts to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. They are going to use their political power to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. That is their plan. But at the same time, they want they want to put sort of a new shine on things for the national media. So they roll out these websites and these press releases saying, no, we really like vote by mail. Here's the deal. If you're a reporter listening to this or just a citizen listening to this, go ask the Republican National Committee why you're spending millions of dollars in court to attack vote by mail and how that squares with these fancy websites you put up for probably 10 grand. Thanks for watching Democracy Docket. Please make sure you're subscribed to our free daily and weekly newsletters to stay up to date on all of the cases that we talk about in this show and more. We'll see you next time.